all these cars are going by, and I didn't realize they were my neighbors. I thought these were people from Ashland coming, had no idea. And I started hearing like explosions. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Again, no fire. I didn't see anything. I was like literally in a cocoon.
So welcome everybody to the third episode of Teacher Stories. And I'm really lucky to have today with me Kriss Diasio, who is an educational coach and the founder of ADD to Life 20. Welcome, Kriss.
Well, thank you, Xavier. I'm so pleased to be here. It's a real honor. Thank you.
No, thank you. The honor is all mine. So, there's no particular agenda today. It's kind of for us to kind of hear about your story. Can you start telling us about your childhood? Where were you born? What were your parents
yes.
like? Yeah.
So I was born in New York City, and, that was, it was really interesting. My formative years I was in a private school, and they thought it would be a really great idea to teach French and German. And I basically didn't know my own language. So my parents took me out of that school and I went to public school, and I was so far behind. So I know personally, even though I didn't have any diagnosis, it wasn't that, but I struggled. I really struggled. So it took me a long time to know the concepts of English. When I'm here, I'm learning as a child, German, French, which kind of got muddled. And so it was really hard to get a grasp on things. And so my writing was poor, my spelling was poor. So I understand what my students go through. My mother is very successful. She's a retired professor, but she has ADD. So I guess you could say my coaching began when I was young.
Because you were coaching your mother.
Yes, at times, not all the time. She's quite smart and brilliant, but she was my inspiration for sure.
And for those who are watching this and who do not know what ADD is, can you remind us?
Yes, attention deficit disorder. I don't like the disorder part. It makes it like it's, they talk about more neurodiversity. That is the new name for this. But basically the challenge is the $1 million word executive functioning. So that's your planning, organizing, time management, retrieval systems. That's what ADHD is the hyperactive disorder. So the kids who just are always moving all the time or fidgeting. It tends to be more that behavior in boys, whereas girls are more drifters and they're thinking and, oh yeah, I have to get back to work. So it looks different in boys and girls.
For boys and girls.
Yes.
Why did this area, why did you think you wanted to work with teens? Is it because you were kind of seeing yourself and seeing the struggle and wanted to help out?
Yes. And I felt that I was really good at it. I felt like I had a connection with the kids. I understood. And I spent so much time, instead of being on the sales floor, I'd be in the back with the teenagers and they were sharing their problems and struggles. And I went, I think I need to go in a different direction. So my boss at the time said, I've been seeing this in you for a while. She goes, our part-timers love you and you really have a gift for this. I was dealing with, what they used to call the term severely emotionally disturbed children. Mm-hmm. That's what they used to call it. And I got into that. I was also a foster care worker and a child protection investigator. So I've dealt with severe. And I think that's what has helped me, my skill sets as a child protection investigator. You learn investigative strategies. So that's where I can always tell if a student is lying. It's like, no, you want to tell me the truth. So I learned a lot of skills with all of this, but it wasn't until in my 30s that I got the call to teach. And I was
Sorry, Kriss, let me go back to
sure.
Child protection investigator. So
yes,
my understanding is that you would work with kids who had actually been abused.
Yes.
And you would kind of try to get to the bottom of it because kids don't always say the truth about what's happening to them. Can you tell us more about this and maybe like
yes.
examples?
So that was one of those things I kind of fell into, if you will. But my ex-husband at the time was in the military. He was active duty. And we had mixers all the time. So I was meeting the other military wives, and my husband was a platoon leader. So I decided to have a coffee and welcome some of the enlisted soldiers' wives to come over and basically break that barrier. You know, these guys are young. They were in the Deep South. They see an officer's wife and they're like, you know, intimidation. I'm like, no, all our husbands are serving. We're all the same footing. So I got to meet them. And one young gal a few weeks later said, I've been accused of child abuse. And so I immediately got on the phone and talked to the investigator at the time, who wound up being a colleague. And she says, you know, the way you described everything, you're really good at this. She says, do you want a job? And I went, sure, because I wasn't working at the time. We were stationed in Louisiana. And so that's how I got into that. After I was married and I had my child, I wanted to stay home and have my own business. And I thought, you know what? Let me work with ADHD and dyslexic students. And so I did that for 20 years, then went a different direction. And then I was actually program manager for sex trafficked girls. And that was an intense job, but I loved it. I gained so many skills. I mean, I was the boss. I had 18 employees. And then with the pandemic, they wanted me to still show up. And I'm like, yeah, you know, health and safety and all of that. So
that job was also trying to defend victims of sex trafficking?
Yes, that's correct. So I worked at a safe house. And so I worked with the girls and I worked with the staff. I trained the staff on how to navigate with these girls.
So girls who were forced, can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yes.
To come into the country from.
Yes, they were, some of them, a lot of them were from here. The majority of the girls that I worked with were from here, but they were sex trafficked. You know, a lot of them are sexually abused by family members. And then, you know, an uncle, this is terrible, but an uncle say, hey, you know, I can make money off of her. And so usually it starts with family members and they traffic out their nieces or daughters. And then the girls get into what we call the life. And it's very hard. It takes about 2 years to get out of the life. And there's all different stages and different intensities. So my job was not only to work with them, because I've had over 30 years of working with intense children and, you know, have had trainings on all of it. And my job was to also educate and bring the staff up to speed, making sure that they're getting trained and discussing some of the things that are hard for them. So it's like the girls were one avenue and then the staff was another. Because when you're working with, you know, children who have sex crimes, of course, some of my staff has gone through rape or sexual abuse themselves. So to keep them well and healthy, like, yes, you're working with this kid, but knowing the boundaries, okay. Usually when we interview, we make sure that they're pretty solid. You have to be pretty solid in this line of work. If you're a little bit, and the way we interviewed was such that you have to really know what you're doing. And you have to be solid as a person. You can't be, well, I want to help the girls. No, you need a little bit more skin in the game. So yeah, it was very, you know, these girls have gone through huge trauma. And just to give you a quick, very interesting view on trauma, you think of your hand, right? And the lower part is your cerebellum. The thumb is your limbic system. That's your feelings. And this is the front part of your brain. So you and I are talking front brain to front brain, okay? These girls are down here in the fight or flight. So teaching them, coaching them, having them have therapies, they had horse therapy, they had many therapies, is to get them feeling their feelings and getting in the front part of the brain. So leaving from here to the front. And so, when they were only with us for a year. And then they would go off and do well. They'd either go to foster families or they would return back to their original family.
Also, they were very young.
So it was really interesting. And it was, they were 13 to 18, but 13 to 17. And it's tragic. And when you see, and they come with, these aren't like, they remind me a little bit of the juvenile offenders I work with, but they have, unfortunately, and it's a coping skill, a set of skills on them that is like no other teenager. They are brilliant at lying. They are brilliant manipulators, but you got to realize they needed those skills to be on the street.
Yeah.
So with training my staff on how to navigate through that and how to, like instead of that, they didn't, as children, some of them were many of them were violated. So they only know how to manipulate and lie because it was survival. So how to get them out of that way, saying simple, like, when a little kid goes, "You hurt my feelings," they don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
Because it was never encouraged.
They lie to themselves also, maybe to kind of protect themselves as a defense mechanism.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And have you, and I think there's a step that you skipped that I heard about from Ben, which is that the California wildfire impacted you heavily. Was it 2019?
No, 2020. So last September 8th, I lost my home, burnt to the ground with the Alameda fires. It's so funny. I always said Alameda, like in the Bay Area, but it's Alameda.
Alameda.
And yes, so my home got the worst of it. My area did.
So were you there? Can you walk us through like what happened?
Yeah.
You were living in that house when it happened?
Yeah. Well, I left 15 minutes before it caught fire. And so this is what happened. There was a terrible windstorm the night before, 35 to 45 mile per hour winds. And it woke me up at like 2:30 in the morning. And I'm looking outside and I'm like, I can't believe it was almost like hurricane for us. Remember, I don't live in the part of the country that probably sees that more often.
But hurricanes, yeah.
Exactly. So, and Oregon has pretty nice weather. And my mother called around 10:30 saying, "Hey, so she lives in Ashland. That's where I live now. It was 7 minutes away. So it's Ashland, Talent, Phoenix. Talent and Phoenix, you remember what happened in Paradise, California. That's what happened to us. So yes, there's little parts of the town, but it's been demolished. And so I get this call saying that they had to evacuate. And I didn't have any radio. I didn't have anything. I had internet, but I was used to being in the Bay Area and originally born and raised in New York, some kind of alert system. And I had nothing. So where I lived on Talent Avenue is I'm seeing all these cars go by for hours. And I'm thinking,
what time is it when this happens?
This was, so my mom called at 11. So everything was quiet, but I noticed that around 1:30
p.m.
on 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon, all these cars are going by, and I didn't realize they were my neighbors. I thought these were people from Ashland coming. Had no idea, and I started hearing like explosions. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Again, no fire. I didn't see anything. I was like literally in a cocoon. Then finally, my electricity went out twice, but the second time was really looming. It was like that final. It felt creepy. So I was reading. I go over to my sliding glass door, and not in my backyard, but where behind my neighbor's fence, there was black billowing smoke. And I went, oh my gosh, I better get upstairs. Now, I'm going to stop the story for a second. My father here is a CERT leader, CERT. It's emergency preparedness. And all last year he was saying, you should have 2 bags, to-go bags, pack things that are really important to you. So I had my 2 backpacks. I had things in my vehicle. And I was a scrapbooker.
First aid, a little bit of food, a little bit of water.
Yes.
Like this.
Yes.
A
toilet paper.
Yeah.
Paper towel, all kinds. So I had 2 backpacks, but I'm going to be writing a book on what you really need.
So
in the event of a fire.
What do you need?
What you need is you basically need your suitcase open. Now this is going to be annoying, but there's a reason. So you want 5 days of really nice clothes, because the night before on Labor Day weekend, this is Labor Day weekend. Okay. And I asked my mom, the last thing I had to pack were clothes. And she goes, oh, pack all your icky clothes. So that's what I had for 3 weeks. T-shirts, raggedy, nasty, because, who cares? You're like, oh, when you think of evacuation, you think, oh, I'll come back. Yeah. And I didn't. So the 8th is when I had to evacuate. The 9th is when I found out that my home was gone.
Wow.
So, but I did have a big bag of 9 scrapbooks of my daughter's life. I lost 20, but the heartbreaking thing is to all the things that I only had one child. So all the things she made in elementary school, the little handprints, all of those type of things are gone. And how do you wrap your mind around it? But I also told my daughter, I've been through so much adversity in my life that it really was a preparation for dealing with the fire. And getting back to the story, when I saw that black billowing smoke, I went upstairs. I was in a townhouse. I packed another bag. And at that point, I heard a police officer saying, evacuate immediately. So there's no warning. There was minus my electricity going out, but I didn't see anything. I didn't hear that my phone wasn't going off. Nothing. And then I left. And then the scary part was driving through the town. Everything was on fire. So you got to figure 25-foot flames.
Wow.
All while down this corridor that I was driving to get to Ashley. And it was like a war zone. The bombs, because it was the gas stations.
Were exploding.
Lots of exploding. It was horrific. And still, even though I saw that, so my former student came by to check on me. So I left at 2:30. My former student came by at 2:45. He said he couldn't see in the garage because there's that little window. And he said he went to ring the doorbell and he realized the back of my house was on fire. So he told me that 3 weeks later. And I said, thank you for telling me, because it kind of frames the story, doesn't it? Like what happened.
Left, and
so
15 minutes later, your house was on fire.
Right. But I did not know that until 3 weeks later. So while I was with my family, my parents, thank God for them, I wound up spending the night with them. And the next day, my daughter calls me going, hi, Mom. She lives 3 hours north of me. So she lives in Eugene. And she goes, how are you doing? And I said, I'm fine. She goes, do you know what happened? I said, no. She goes, well, I sent you a video. So I hung up, watched the video, 6 minutes. And that's when I knew my house was gone. And I saw my house on fire. So campfires are not the thing for me. I have issue around that, but I'm taking it one day at a time. And
so how is it, Kris? Like so you've lost your house with your memories and
yes,
and you so it's all gone, right? And I'm
gone.
hoping, like, did the insurance help you out financially?
Yes, yes. So I have that. So I've replaced, but I'm still living with my parents. That's another thing. 3,000 of us were displaced. So getting rentals around here are really hard right now. Because there's so many of us looking. And then some people are taking advantage of that. Like, let's raise the rent ridiculous. So I thank God that my parents took me in and that they have a big home to absorb me. And so,
And psychologically, is it, I mean, you've been dealing with a lot of tough things in your life, but also in other people's life. Is there a silver lining? Is there something positive to take away from starting fresh like this with just 10 books of pictures of your daughter?
Yes.
And a few t-shirts?
I have been very lucky when I realized in June, I'm like, it's time for me to have my self-employment. I dove into LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has been an incredible family. I hired a visibility coach. Her name is Mildred Talabi. She's amazing. And she helped me with everything, how to be because I had my business more old school. Like, I'd meet the parents, I talk. Now I'm on Google, I have YouTube channel, I have everything. And I hired a former student of mine to get all of that part done. And so I had to rebuild a business that I'm a great teacher, but all of this technology, how do you navigate through that? So I hired actually a former parent and a former student to help me be where I am. And in that process, I met the most amazing people. I met you and Ben, and it's just been really wonderful. It's made me happy. And it takes my mind off, as I'm learning new technology, like going into Koala and like, oh, look at this. And that's made me so joyful because it takes me away from the fire. And not that I ignore it or I'm dealing with that, of course, but it has been absolutely wonderful. And while I can't replace the memories, I think the best thing someone can say to a fire victim is, I can't imagine. It's like, yep, you can't. Yeah. But I love it when people have said, well, thank God you're okay. You know, you can replace everything else. And I'm thinking of all the cute little things my daughter made, which I have a story in a minute. But, you know, my grandfather's military uniform, can't get that on Amazon. Yeah. So all of those type of things but my parents' friends said, you know, you should have your daughter recreate some things. And so I told my daughter, I said, listen, you know, that little heart, there's a little heart-shaped ceramic thing. So she put her 22-year-old handprint in, and she gave it to me for Christmas, and I loved it. I said, what do I care that you're 22, not 2, you know? So she's like, okay, Mom, I think I know what I'm going to do for you. So I said, she goes, you're going to have to let me know what you miss and what you want. And she'll recreate it as an adult, but I don't care. So that's the silver lining, is seeing the positive and meeting all the tremendous people I've met. That has been really an uplift. And just keeping, you know, since I share with my students and teach and coach them on having a positive mental attitude, it's like, oh, I've walked through adversity. I know this one. I was divorced, single parent, had cancer, and recently, right before the fire, diagnosed with diabetes. And I'm managing all diet and exercise. I don't take any meds. So I have walked through the shadow of the valley. So I know it isn't, you're so sweet. But I know that a lot of my students have intense stories also. Yeah. And not that I sit there and tell them my story, but I listen to theirs. And as I get to know them, I might share parts, but that's not my job, is to share my sad story. It's to really empower them. But I know what it's like to walk through adversity and be there with a person. Just be supportive. You know, I think the best thing you can do is, I always, as the teachers know this, 2 ears, 1 mouth. So listen twice as hard. Yeah. That's the key. It's giving people your time and letting my students know, you know what, you're going to make it. I've had so many of my students still keep in touch with me that are grown, married, successful. Everybody thinks of a diagnosis and they see all the negative, and a parent especially is dealing with it day in and day out. Whereas I get to see them, no, I see how they're going to be. And that's really good too. So, and so today you're running a business called ADD to Life 20, which, if I'm not mistaken, helps kids deal with their learning differences. Exactly. So, you know, and I think there's a lot of lack of understanding in our world about the emotional challenges that kids face when they have learning differences, how much it impacts their self-esteem, especially at a time like in your teenage years where self-esteem is everything. You know, you need confidence will make a huge impact. And so can you tell us a little bit more about this aspect? Yes. So just to back up and explain my title of my business, ADD is not only for attention deficit, but it's for AD. It's an ad for my kids. My students are able to do far more than other students can. They can multitask. I heard it said that it's like they're in a Ferrari with bicycle brakes. So learning how to brake, learning how to stop, learning about time management. I give them a lot of visual cues and tools and support, but they're trying to, you know, you figure, just look at a teenager and you look at all the dynamics and the friend aspect or dating, if they're getting into that, that's enormous, let alone now you have a diagnosis. And now your brain is wired in a way that moves brilliantly fast, but it has like, oh, I have to, you know, talk to my mom in half an hour. All my kids hear is, okay, not now. So I have all the time in the world. It's like, so I give them a lot of visuals and a lot of things to help them. And I said, here's the thing, your parents not always going to be around you all the time. You're going to go off, you're going to have your own life, be in college, wherever your destination is, you have to learn to do this for yourself. So breaking down skills and making it into more manageable pieces, and also giving them coping skills. It's a lot of what I do. It's not just educational, it's also social emotional and talking about behaviors. You know, do you fly off the handle? Where's the regulation system, emotional regulation? You know, are they able to stop and listen? Because they want to be listened to, but when the parents turn, no, you know, they get all into that, but how to manage that, how to slow it down a little bit. Also how to deal with their neurology, their movement, to have a fidget, to be on a exercise ball, to when you're spinning out, or a lot of kids are diagnosed now with not only ADHD, dyslexia, but now anxiety, depression has entered the building. Huge amounts of diagnosis with that. So how do you navigate through that? And to take a stop. Okay, let's go walk the dog. Let's get out of your room. Let's do something. And then teaching them, like setting the stage.
Break.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're no good to anybody, especially themselves, if they're spinning out, and they tend to dwell. My students are dwellers. So to be able to teach them coping skills and life skills, and also educational tools, so they can navigate as young adults, and to be independent is key. I've had 30 years dealing with intense students. I see what happens to them. I see that, they do become successful. They really do. So I know how this looks and plays out, where she doesn't have that information. But just to also coach the parents into not being that helicopter parent. Well, you didn't do this and you didn't fall. And I'm like, listen, they need a little taste of failure, because they're going to learn from that. And that's what the parent prevents. And they spend so much energy. No, they can't. And I got to take care of it. But what if they, okay, take a step back. Okay. And I also say, you know what, let me get this. Let me take care of their education, because they have to answer to me. And as a coach, I come in as a neutral party and a mentor, and also an advocate for the child, and able to so a child could say, you never listen to me. Whereas I say, I think they're feeling a little pressure. So maybe I show them, can you make a list for your student? And then say, okay, can you get back to me in 3 days? I said, here's the thing. When they share what they've gotten back to, good job. That's all. You forgot this, and they get spun out. Yeah. And it's like, no. So coaching the parent on how to communicate more effectively with students is key, as much as I have to coach the kid on how do you present the truth. Because my students sometimes are very good liars. And why? Because when they told the truth, they got bamboozled, right? Or they got shot down. And they don't want to feel that again. So they're much better for the lie. But I tell them, a partial truth is a whole lie. So it gives the illusion that you're having the off, but you're going to pay for it down the road. So let's not do that. So as I'm coaching the child, the student, how to communicate with mom, I'm also coaching mom to take a step back, let me get this. And then I always keep parents in the loop. But over time, it's like, okay, I will keep you in touch, because it's kind of like addiction, really. It's like, well, how are they doing? Is everything okay? And I understand. It's a real challenging road to raise kids who have these issues. But, give it a minute, take a step back. What can you do for you? Can you take a walk? Can you go to the gym? Yeah. Just be okay. I got this. And yes, I'll keep in touch with you. So that way everybody's kind of calming down, focusing and settling. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. It does. Absolutely. And so that's ADD to Life 20. And if parents are watching this and want to reach out to you, what's the best way to contact you?
They can contact me at addtolife20@gmail.com.
Kris, thank you so much. You're a freaking rock star. It was such an honor to have you. Thank you for everything you do.
Well, bless you. And I'm so grateful to you guys for all the hard work you're doing. It's amazing. Someday you're going to get an award for all of this. I swear, I feel it. So I'm very grateful to you and the genius that you're doing.
That means a lot, Kris. Thank you so much.